I am so excited for this session. This is something I kind of nerd out about is success criteria, because to me, this is where a lot of misconceptions lie for teachers, this tension between what am I responsible for planning versus what am I co-constructing with students. And I think the clearer that we are about what success looks like at the start of the unit, the stronger our units really become. So when I transitioned to really defining this in my classroom, it was a big aha that transformed my teaching practice. And I know it will do that for your teaching practice. So let's jump into it. I'm going to be sharing you a 3-step process that I use for creating success criteria that really ground the unit. So I'm going to start by asking you in the chat, what are we responsible for assessing in a PYP classroom? Go ahead and pop it in there. What are we responsible as educators for assessing? I see some coming in. What are you seeing, Shambhavi?
ATLs, central idea. There's also conceptual understanding, skills. Yep.
Nice.
Knowledge, elements.
Nice. You guys nailed it, right? So it's in the new planner. We are responsible for assessing knowledge, understanding, and skills, what students know, understand, and are able to do. These are what we call our success criteria. You can use them synonymously. I really like this metaphor from Jay McTighe. So he talked about inquiry being like a river. And he said that as inquiry educators, we define the banks of the river. And for us, that's defining what will students know, understand, and be able to do as a result of this unit. So especially educators who are just starting out tend to shy away from this. We go, oh no, we want it to be open inquiry. But I would add that the stronger that we are with those boundaries, with where the unit's going, often the stronger the unit will become. So when I'm talking about knowledge, understanding, and skills, I like to be really explicit. So when we're talking about knowledge, we mean facts, information, theories. It's the information that's going to help form the understandings, which leads to understandings. That's the lasting information. It's kind of how we place the information in our brain, the connections that we make. And then finally, skills, what we're able to do. And this is a combination of skills, like the ATL, as well as our dispositions. Guy Claxton refers to this as the willingness and readiness to apply skills in real life. So I think those kind of go hand in hand. Let's do an example here, because sometimes, especially knowledge and understanding can get really mixed up. And especially as PYP teachers, we tend to focus a lot on the understandings and less so on the knowledge. So let's go one at a time. If I'm trying to learn about healthy living a more active and healthy lifestyle, what knowledge, what facts and information might I need? Go ahead and enter in the chat. What knowledge, what facts and information would I need to know about living a healthy lifestyle? I'm going to actually open up the chat so I can see too. Oh, I can't do it. I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
You can do it, yeah.
What are you seeing, Sean? Yeah.
Reduce healthy food, exercise, sleep. Again, healthy food, the food pyramid, daily routines. There are also some questions coming in, like what is being healthy? Then mindfulness, discipline, emotional well-being. Again, a question, what do healthy people look like? How the body works,
okay.
And body systems. Yeah, about the body. Yeah,
so I might be looking at food groups, the way that different foods are processed in my body. If I weigh a certain amount, how many calories should I be eating? Just that facts and information. What might be some skills that I would develop in terms of healthy living?
Okay, sorting foods, self-management.
Mm-hmm. Nice reference to the ATL there.
Maybe some recipes, how to make healthy food, setting up healthy diet with exercise, responsibility, resilience, mindfulness, making choices, social emotional well-being, balance.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you guys got it, right? Often we skip the knowledge part. So often we have the understandings. So a central idea, we have, what are the big ideas we want to take away? But sometimes we forget to backtrack and go, okay, if I really want kids to understand this, this is the information they're going to need to know. And these are the skills. This is what they're going to need to be able to do with that knowledge. So that's really what this whole webinar is going to be about, is how do you explicitly plan this knowledge, understanding, and skills for your unit in a way that grounds you in your curriculum. Okay, so this is my 3-step process. And again, the intention behind this is that we want to ground learning in solving big real world problems, in making connections, and then just having that knowledge and skill that they can apply towards doing that. So we're kind of going to start big and work our way backwards. So let's jump right in, thinking big. So, ooh, that's weird. What? Oh no, sorry guys. Here we go again. Okay, let's start with thinking big. The way that we think big in the PYP is through our transdisciplinary themes. So as we know, these are the 6 real world problems that are faced by all humans across time and space, right? So when we're thinking about thinking big, we want to ground all of our learning through the context of these problems. So you begin by selecting the relevant transdisciplinary theme and selecting your indicators. So you really just want to choose the piece of it that you're going to focus on. Oops. So for me, I'm going to be modeling a unit throughout this, a markets unit. And so I would be focusing on this last indicator, economic activities and their impact on humankind and the environment. That would be the indicators I'm focusing on. And I like to go a step further. So I define this as a why statement or a problem statement. So I ask myself, how is this relevant for my students? What do I hope that they take away and that in 10 years, they might still remember for this unit? So when I'm thinking about my markets unit, really to me, it boils down to this tension that exists between sustainability and profit, right? How do I make a product and make money without damaging my community or damaging my environment? That's really the big problem that we're going to be exploring throughout the entire unit. You should be able to clearly and explicitly state the problem for your unit in this way and have an idea of why it's relevant for your learners. Okay, so once we've grounded ourselves in a problem, remember for me, it's that tension between sustainability and profit, we're ready to define our lines of inquiry. And I define lines of inquiry a little bit different than some people do. And I think that going through this process really empowers you to pull in all of your disciplinary knowledge to empower connection making. Okay, so as we know, as PYP educators, we're doing conceptual education. Concepts are those big ideas, those big kind of lasting ideas. So for example, in math, some big ideas would be things like data handling or measurement or number. And as a PYP educator, I'm trying to think about how do all of these concepts connect to solve that big problem that I identified in step 1. One of the common pitfalls that I see when people are starting to think conceptually, their lines of inquiry are really your conceptual statements, is that they tend to be very disciplinary, right? So again, I'm exploring the tension between profit and sustainability. A common line of inquiry for this unit is the role of supply and demand. That is so limiting, right? I can only really explore social studies through that line of inquiry. As opposed to looking at a line of inquiry like how market economies function, then I can pull in related concepts. Like I can still do the social studies content, but I can also pull in arts. So I might look at how marketing and advertising functions in a business. I can look at how I can use data to model in mathematics to help my business function. And I can still look at language and see how the advertising helps my business function. So we can see how this line of inquiry is truly open to collaboration with multiple subjects. So if this is kind of our goal, is to have these transdisciplinary lines of inquiry, how do we go about doing that? So how do we write great lines of inquiry? I think it's best that we start with our related concepts. So here you can see this comes from the C3 framework. It's a social studies framework. So at the start of every unit, I go through a process of selecting my standards. Some schools, you'll already have your standards selected for you. Some you have to select them yourselves. And you can see just in these two standards that I've selected, I see the concepts of choice, incentive, and economic decision-making. These are the big ideas that students will use to understand my central idea. Let's take a look at a couple more examples. Actually here, okay, so here are the arts. This comes from the arts PYP scope and sequence. And I want you to take a look at the standards I've selected. And can you try to pull out the big ideas? What are the big ideas you see embedded in these standards? Go ahead and type those into the chat. What big ideas do you see here?
So Claudia says influence is a big idea.
Nice.
Beliefs, connections, appreciation.
Gorgeous. Absolutely.
Values and personal interests. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, you can see how these are kind of the tools of the arts that we're going to use for unpacking that big transdisciplinary problem. So you pulled out the same ones I did: interest, influence, beliefs, and values. And you'll see I actually added an additional related concept here of advertising. This wasn't necessarily in my standards, but I knew to myself, if I'm thinking about the influence of arts in markets and in this kind of context, advertising would be a great related concept to pull in. This is the most skipped step that I see in classrooms. Often we select the standards and then we never really look at them again. But taking the time to be really familiar with your curriculum, to pull out the big why behind the subject is collaborating, is such an essential step that really has a profound impact on our practice. My slideshow is being so funny.
Maybe you can stop sharing and then share again. That should.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, guys. It's being so weird. Okay. So at the start of a unit, I do this for each of the subjects that are collaborating. So we modeled doing social studies and arts together, but I did the same thing with math and languages. So in math, I knew that decimals would be kind of a big skill we would be working on, but I wanted to put it through the conceptual lens of the unit. So how do we use decimals in a unit? How do we use mathematics to model and make reasons and decisions regarding our business and the economic sustainability of our business? In language, I really wanted to connect language and arts. So if I'm going to be studying advertising and arts, how might I use the concept of persuasion and information to really explore these ideas? Okay, so once I have all of my related concepts that I found from my curriculum standards and pulled out, then I'm ready to sort and regroup them into my key concepts. And again, many teachers do this the opposite way. They start with their key concepts first, but I would argue that starting with your curriculum, pulling out those related concepts, then you're better able to group them logically under your key concepts, just seeing the themes that are emerging. So it's doing it again. Okay.
Cindy, just stop sharing. Like rather than simply going out of the slideshow, just stop sharing once. Yeah, and then let's see if that works.
Okay. Sorry, guys. I'm having a really hard time today with tech.
Not a problem. Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. Better? Let's see. Woof. Okay. Take a breath. Okay. So one of the key concepts that really stood out to me in this unit was function. So it stood out to me because I could easily integrate all of my subjects. I saw the role of arts, social studies, math, and language. And because I knew that if I'm looking at how a business functions, advertising. So in arts and language, advertising was going to play a role in how my business would function. Mathematics would help me in my business planning and in the economic side of things. And in social studies, understanding supply and demand and incentives. So all of these related concepts that I pulled from my curriculum easily fall into this idea of how a business functions. Let's look at another example. So again, I was able to connect all 4 of my collaborating subjects here through responsibility. So if I'm looking at sustainability, In arts and language, I might be thinking about the society and the well-being and how I can design a marketing plan that actually helps my community. In social studies, I might be focusing more on the economic or nature sustainability. And in maths, again, looking back at the economic sustainability. So these are the related concepts that have come from my curriculum, and I'm able to regroup them meaningfully under my key concepts to form these really strong lines of inquiry. So this one was creating sustainable business plans. Okay. I might pause there for a second because I feel like this process for creating lines of inquiry can feel a little bit tricky. Any questions emerging about how this is done or about kind of the thinking here?
Nothing right now, but I'm sure people might write something into the chat. There was one observation that was shared, which was about adding influence, just connecting that with social media and market to explore the impact of social media.
Totally. Yeah, and that's kind of the, oh, sorry.
Sorry, there are two more questions, but once you're done, Cindy, I'll take them up.
Okay. Yeah, that's such a powerful part of looking back at your curriculum is that you're really able to kind of make all these interesting connections that you might not have. Because like when I think of the concept of incentive, like you said, there's so many new ideas that emerge that you maybe wouldn't have thought about if you hadn't explored your curriculum. What were those other questions, Shambhavi?
Yeah, so one question is, do you choose related concepts first or do you just choose concepts first?
I choose related concepts first. So some people work backwards. They choose the key kind of overarching concept first. But for me, by really drilling down into my discipline, I can then resort those into my key concepts, if that makes sense. So like I did here, these are all of my related concepts. But then from here, I can look back and say, okay, choice and economic decision-making, as well as advertising, as well as math, those all fall under function, right? So instead of trying to think about the big picture and pull random ideas, I'm really starting from my curriculum, and that grounds me.
So something slightly related to that was, is there a document you pull the related concepts from, or should we come up with that?
So your related concepts should come from your curriculum. That's the best way that I know to do it. So if your school is using scope and sequence, that would be your curriculum document. Some of us are using Common Core, Next Generation, Arrow standards. Once you select your kind of standards, let's say you've selected 5 standards in social studies, take the time to go back to that standards, and that's where you pull those related concepts from.
And do we have scope for like a couple more? Just one question was, how do you balance creating these deep lines of inquiry and also making sure that the content standards are covered for state reporting?
Well, to me, this is exactly how you do that. So rather than just having, so for example, the markets unit, I always see that line of inquiry, supply and demand is a line of inquiry. I guarantee you, if you Google markets unit, it's in every single one. I would argue that you're really not going to authentically integrate arts or language or math even into a line of inquiry about supply and demand. However, if I have the line of inquiry, how a business functions, I really can authentically connect my standards back to it because that's kind of where the ideas came from. So again, I think this is a really missed step, is that your related concepts are embedded in those standards that you've already selected, and don't just ignore them, pull them out and bring them forward.
Cool.
Awesome. I'm so glad you guys asked questions about this because this can feel really tricky at first, honestly, but strong lines of inquiry are a great start for strong assessment. So let's move on ahead. Once I've got my big problem, so again, for me, I'm thinking about that tension between sustainability and profit. Then I've defined 3 to 4 lines of inquiry that really articulate the related concepts that are embedded in my standards. And now I'm ready to zoom into the knowledge and skills. So this is my concept. If I want kids to understand this, what do they need to know and what do they need to be able to do? So let's again clarify the difference between knowledge and skills, right? So if I want my students to have this understanding of the line of inquiry or my key concepts, what facts, what information, what vocabulary is going to build that understanding? And on the same token, what are the skills? What are we going to do? And what are the dispositions that we're going to have that are going to lead to that understanding? And all of this is truly found in your curriculum standards. This is my soapbox. Go back to your curriculum standards. So the way that I do this when I'm looking for knowledge and skills is kind of in 3 steps. I look back at my curriculum, and then thinking about the understanding, I try to pull out the facts and information they would need and the skills and dispositions they would need. A tip I like to include here is to only include the knowledge and skills that you plan to teach and assess. One of the big problems that I see in schools is that when teachers are selecting standards for a unit, they'll just go tick, 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 and they'll have these gigantic lists of standards that, if we're being practical, there is no way that you're going to newly introduce, newly teach, and explicitly assess everything on that page. So really whittle it down to what you're explicitly going to teach and assess in a unit. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Again, I'm coming back to the C3 framework. So these are my curriculum standards. And I know that my understanding is how a business functions. So then as a teacher, I just think to myself, okay, what is the knowledge they're going to need? In economics, they're going to need to know what is a producer versus what is a consumer, and kind of what are the roles. Directly from my curriculum, they're going to need to know the word of benefit or incentive and costs and negatives. I'm going to need to explicitly teach that. And cause and effect. That's kind of an implied knowledge that's part of this. And what this might look like, actions connected to this, would be things like comparing the benefits and costs of choices, identifying, oh, what are the incentives for making a decision, and justifying why people make the choices that they make, right? So these aren't explicitly stated in the standards, but it's a process that I can go through as a teacher to gain clarity. To me, once I have this list of knowledge and skills, I can plan mini lessons. I can explicitly teach this. I can explicitly assess this. It's not a mysterious understanding anymore. There are explicit skills and knowledge that I can tangibly work on. Let's look at another example. So again, here's my math standard. Look at this beast. If you just saw this on your document, there's no way that you would really understand it. So I break it down again into the knowledge. They would need to know operations with decimals, different strategies and methods for working with decimals, and the language of justification. Hey, I think that I should charge X for my product because the products would cost Y. And they would need to be able to use mathematical models to justify the economic choices in their businesses and use decimals to calculate profit and loss and unit price. These are those real world skills that connect back to how a business functions and gets them to practice those mathematical skills that are part of my standards. Whoop. Okay, yeah, so you give it a try. This is the literacy standards that I've selected. Let's start with knowledge. If looking at this set of standard, what pieces of explicit knowledge can you pull out here? What will kids need to know?
Just waiting for answers to drop in. There's a lot that's been happening on the chat. Some really interesting questions. And also people just replying to each other and solving it for everyone.
Oh, yay. Okay, cool. This is tricky stuff, but I'm telling you, it's so transformative.
So we have...
Are we seeing anything?
Yeah, we have Penny saying multimedia components. Then facts versus opinion.
Nice.
Again, various platforms of multimedia. So different modes and modalities. Main idea and themes.
Right.
Again, main idea, theme, main idea. That's definitely a common one. Making infographics.
Sorry.
Making infographics.
Say that one again.
Making infographics.
Ooh, somebody pull it in from Trevor.
And justification.
So that would be more of a skill for sure, would be making infographics. And you guys are nailing it. So when I'm looking at the knowledge here, if a student is able to write an opinion piece, they need to know what is an opinion versus what is a fact. They might need to know things of like, what is a topic sentence? What are supporting details? These are all the concrete pieces of knowledge that they'll need versus the skills. Let's go ahead and into the chat. What are kids going to be doing then with this knowledge?
There's writing opinions, which is already there. Let's see, I think people are typing right now.
Yeah.
Giving reasons, surveying, persuading, transferring and applying. Again, sharing
totally.
Opinions. Taking a stance.
Yeah, and what was that?
Taking a stance. So again, basically, justifying or writing opinions.
Awesome. Yeah, I was really intentional in this unit. So it's an opinion piece, but students were writing business plans. That was part of it. And then they had to use multimedia presentation to present their business plan to investors. It's the ultimate persuasive writing, right? So, hey, this is why you should give me money. This is why my business is a good idea. And they used Canva and they used Google Slides. They made these interactive presentations. So really, they were taking this skill of opinion pieces and putting it through the lens of our unit. So you can see all these pieces come together, your conceptual understanding and the explicit knowledge and skills that are coming from your curriculum, and it all really makes sense together. One Toddle tip that I like to put here is that I like to have my success criteria directly in my Toddle planner. So the way I organize myself is I have the key concept, and then under each key concept, I put knowledge, understanding, skill. It looks like this. So pretty simple. It's just kind of lists of things. So if my key concept is responsibility, they're going to need to know how to do a SWOT analysis. They're going to need to know what a sustainability compass is. And they're going to need to be able to create plans, determine balance between sustainability and profit. By the time I get to the stage of putting it in my planner, it's not a mystery anymore. I've already unpacked my curriculum standards, and I've taken the time to really articulate this for each subject area. So what do you do with these? Once you have your success criteria written, they're really kind of the launching point as a teacher. So to me, this becomes kind of a cycle. Once I've identified my success criteria, they're sometimes called learning goals, then I plan assessments. So as the unit begins, I say, hey, if at the end of the unit, this is what I want kids to know, understand, and be able to do, what do they already know, understand, and can do connected to this? So planning prior or assessing prior knowledge. Once I have the data about that, then I'm ready to set individual and class goals connected to the success criteria. So these are the patterns that we're seeing. This is how we might organize students. And then from there, it's really simple to plan explicit lessons, to plan explicit learning engagements that target that knowledge, understanding, and skills. So instead of units feeling just kind of hodgepodge and mystery, they're really grounded in my curriculum, and it's something I can come back to again and again. I have a bonus section too. We finished really early, and I thought we might. So I have this kind of bonus section, and I wonder if you guys might like to gander at this, because this is the question that I assumed would come up, is how do we use these success criteria while still supporting student agency? So how do we make sure kids still have voice and choice while still grounding ourselves in success criteria? Would this be helpful to go through?
Everyone can actually just do like a quick poll in the chat. Yes. Okay. There's a huge yes. And
yeah.
Yes. Yes. Lots of yes. So I think it's a yes.
Okay. I thought there might. So what I did was I just went back through. So this is a unit I actually taught, and these are success criteria I actually used in my classroom. So I went through 1 week in my classroom and just picked out every learning engagement so I could share with you my thinking of what this looked like. So this might be a bit of a mess, but I thought it would be kind of fun. So one thing, I kind of spoke to this already. If we're doing guided inquiry, we're responsible for curricular content, processes, and evidence. And students really have ownership over their questions. So really being curious about something and about finding connections and about making sense of all the information that's provided. So I think having clarity about our different roles is important. And that connects back to this idea of agency, right? So what are students responsible for? Can they have agency? Like, do they have to have ownership over everything? And so I think really defining that with your team of when are students going to have agency over curricular content? When, if ever? When will students have agency over process, if ever? And when will students have agency over evidence, if ever? And just knowing that for yourself. So let's take a look at some examples. Oh, this idea comes from Phil Beadle's talk, is that there is still room for inquiry and agency within a box. Like oftentimes we think like, let's think outside of the box. But if you're given an assignment for work or something, there are going to be parameters, there are going to be requirements, and that's our curriculum. Our curriculum is the box, but there's still so much room for inquiry and agency within that box. So this is 1 week in my classroom. So every week I mapped my success criteria out. So I said, okay, in week 2, this is what we're working on. Not to say that these were inflexible, but I tried to create a map at the start of the unit of kind of what concepts I thought we would be working on when, which concepts I thought would take a lot more time or, and that was always flexible and changing. But this is kind of what my beginning of the week planning looked like, a conceptual plan that I based everything off of. And this is what it looked like. So this is an engagement that I did with students. It's towards the start of the unit, and we wanted to practice the conceptual language of causation. So we started the lesson by playing Jenga, and I asked the students, what caused the tower to collapse? And the hope was that they would elicit like, not one thing caused the tower to collapse. It was all of our like contributed actions. So then I shared with them this poster. We had just done a unit on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So they were familiar with this structure. And I said, okay, compare and contrast this to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and let's brainstorm what causes people to buy what they buy, right? So this is just one example of a lesson. And this is another one. So I like to emphasize, I always structure the process and students have the choice. So we revisited, okay, these are consumers' needs. What do you think we might want to make for them? And if we're going to design a survey to collect that data, what information do we need to collect? Should we do this individually or as a whole class? Who should we send the survey out to? So I had the process of what we would be doing. Students had choice on what kinds of questions they'd ask, if we'd craft it together, who in the school we would send the survey out to. So there's room for choice, even within a structured process. This is us co-creating success criteria. So caring was one of our learner profile attributes. So we watched videos about different businesses and we said, okay, why are we looking at the learner profile of caring? What does it mean to be caring in a business? And we came to the class to talk about if being a caring business owner is one of our success criteria, what does that look like? Then we had a spiderweb discussion, just like Trevor was talking about. So what's most important for an entrepreneur to consider? If we're trying to be caring business owners, if we're trying to be have sustainable business, what do you think is the most important thing for an entrepreneur to consider? So I was again hearing them practice the language and looking for misconceptions. And then finally, after doing all of that, we came together, we reviewed what it meant to be caring, and we set personal goals connected to that. So for me, if I'm growing the attribute of caring, what does it look like and sound like for me? It's really easy for me to be caring when, and it's harder for me when, and it's important to me because. So again, even though there was a lot of structure here, students still had that agency in deciding what did caring look like for them and why, or was it important for them? I'm going to pause. Is this helpful seeing classroom examples? Yes, no? Is it just kind of?
Yes, yes.
Okay, cool. I think I've got a couple more. I tried to embed success criteria throughout the day intentionally. So even you can see, so this is just like word work, traditional word work, but instead of just having random things, I would tailor it to the unit. So connecting to our math, lining up your decimals is important when adding and subtracting because, but, so this is such a cool routine. It helps kids think about contradictions. Something is important because, but is kind of a shift in thought. And so is kind of what you do with that information. So because I was familiar with the success criteria, I was able to kind of sneak it in lots of places. So we were practicing the vocabulary and we were practicing the knowledge and the concepts throughout the day. Again, often I structure the process and students structure the choices. So here, I wanted them to choose a cool product to make for a market. So I scaffolded that. We crafted a list of potential target markets. We brainstormed what might be products they'd be interested in. And then the students had the choice in the end of which product they would make and which target market they would address and why. But it wasn't just kind of a random go off and decide something random to make. We did that research process together. And I scaffolded it. So once they chose, like one group chose to make fidgets. And rather than just saying, okay, well, go research your competitors, I've created a structure for them to organize their thinking in, and I provided resources for them to do their research. So again, they made the choice on what they were interested in, but I continued to scaffold the process. And you can see lots of things embedded here. Apply was part of our, part of ATL skills. I think that might be it. Yeah, that's the end. So just lots of little snippets. So again, this is just random collection of a week in my classroom that authentically, this is what I was doing with kids on a daily basis. And just for me having clarity around what success looked like, I was able just to bring it into the classroom and allow chances for choice and voice, but still in a really guided, scaffolded, and structured way that led to success for all of us. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you guys a little bit better. All right. Any questions that are popping up?
To begin with, Cindy, what grade level is this for? Somebody just asked.
Grade 5. Yeah, I was a grade 5 teacher, and I had most of my students were native English speakers, so I was able to do some pretty complex stuff, which was awesome.
And since we spoke so much about student agency, there was a question about differentiation, which is differentiating success criteria to suit various kinds of learners and their paces and levels of comfort.
Say that again, sorry?
There was a question about differentiation, since we are talking about student agency, and how that can be done to suit different kind of learners within the classroom.
Awesome. See, and I think this again is a misconception. Is when we think of differentiation, we think, oh, we got to do something different with every kid. No. Our success criteria stays the same for everyone in our class. We might extend them for some students, for sure. But for me, by having clarity on our success criteria, we're so much better able to sort our students meaningfully. So for example, if I'm doing a unit and I'm focusing on research skills or citation, and I pre-assess and half the class is already able to use proper punctuation and cite things properly, I'm not going to reteach that skill to them. Instead, I'm going to let them either go off and teach a group who doesn't understand, or I'm going to pull that group who doesn't and work with them individually. So again, to me, it's just this clarity. It's knowing what you're looking for so that you can appropriately intervene or not teach it. If every kid in your class already knows and understands and is able to do this thing, find something else to work on. Don't just do it because it's part of your curriculum.
I think people really agree with that, because a lot of people have in the chat have spoken about how they can see the difference between the have to learn and choice, and how a parent it is and everything that you've spoken about. And someone has said choice is a natural way to cater for all our students' needs. And in general, that is something that people are really agreeing with.
Yes. Choice and genuine curiosity. That's kind of become my big thing, is if kids don't have an authentic question, just keep doing provocations, keep building foundational knowledge. Don't force them into the next part of the inquiry until an authentic question has emerged, because otherwise you're just dragging kids through something then. And that is the worst time ever. Awesome, guys. Yeah, it's not authentic inquiry, totally. I feel like this session got a little crazy and kind of hodgepodge. So any other questions? Guess criteria are so cool and I love them so much, but I know that they can feel kind of weird and daunting and overwhelming at first. So any other things I can clarify before we hop off this call? Oh, I said somebody said, can you please share the learning goals of your unit? Let me see if I can actually pull up the unit planner. Okay, so this is legit how I understood, how I used my planner. So you can see my line of inquiry. Oh, this is a different unit. This was unit 4. No, sorry. 1, unit 4. That's emphasis. Sorry, I don't know which unit it was at this point. Unit 5, maybe? I don't know. Unit 3? Yeah, Mark, it's unit 3. Sorry. So this is how I organized my planner. So you can see I've got my key concept and my related concepts here, and then I've explicitly knowledge, understanding, and skills. So for me, I co-created success criteria for my ATL skill really early in the unit because I knew that this is where the most of the new language would be. So learning, okay, if you're going to need to suggest, what is the language embedded in suggest? What are sentence stems that we can use? What does it successfully look like to suggest something to someone? And then the rest of the success criteria kind of evolved naturally. So like if I'm doing things like ethos, pathos, logos, that might be something I work on at the start of the unit, as opposed to designing a business plan might be something that we do midway or towards the end. So there is a finesse that comes with organizing your success criteria in a way just that makes the most sense for your unit. There isn't like a cut and dry answer for that. Sorry, that took a long time.
Not at all. I think in terms
of...
you
will teach, sorry?
Nothing. I was just saying in terms of questions, that might be that, but there are a lot of people saying big thanks and dropping love on a lot of tools and strategies that you showed. And
I'm so glad.
Oh, wait, there are. Can you share this template, Cindy? Do you still do summative? Okay, there are questions that just came.
So many questions. The template, honestly, my school wasn't a Toddle school and it bummed me out. I think that the Toddle planner is like totally better for recording it. There's a section, learning goal and success criteria. That's where I tend to do it. But if anybody's not yet using Toddle, feel free to shoot me an email and I'm happy to send you my kind of unit planner that I used. Let's see. There was another question here. Do we still do summative assessment where other disciplines are integrated? So technically, I mean, this markets thing was a summative assessment. It was a big project that we were working on. But I think the thinking of summative assessments is just shifted so much. It shouldn't just be like we get all the feedback at the end. It really should be something where the process is valued more than the product. And that way you really can authentically integrate different disciplines. So in this markets unit, we integrated, I mean, social studies, math, and language were home, but the arts teacher was heavily involved, especially in their business plan presentation to investors, as well as to their advertisements that they actually sent out to the consumers in the market. So yeah, there are ways to definitely authentically integrate specialists. All right, I think that's the only question I saw. My email is cindy@toddleapp.com. I'll type it here. Everyone in the meeting, cindy@toddleapp.com. And you guys, oh, cool. You guys can do me a big favor. So that assessment guide, we're going to drop that link one more time. This is what we've been working on seriously for the past like 3 months. So if you could check it out, email me or share with me how you like it, ways we can make these kinds of things better. Because at Toddle Learn, we're just trying to improve the learning process for PYP teachers and make the coolest resources we can. So if you check it out, if you've got suggestions or things you love about it, please let me know. And the link is there. Okay, my friends, I think that is it for this awesome day of learning. For those of you who have been here since session 1 with Jessica Vance and stayed till the end, you are rock stars. So go enjoy your Saturday and don't think about teaching at all again today. So thank you all so much for being here. And we love you. Thanks for coming.